Welcome back to New World Next Week. I'm James Corbett of CorbettReport.com.
And I'm James Evan Pilato of MediaMonarchy.com. This is a very, very bright person we're dealing with. We have got that mystery story, plus conflicts of interest in climate science. But first, Britain secretly funded Reuters in 1960s and 70s. Good night, everybody. James, I very much appreciate that you gave me this story from Reuters.com. Reuters.com reports Britain secretly funded Reuters. The British government, and they don't even say us. The British government secretly funded Reuters in the 1960s and 70s at the behest of an anti-Soviet propaganda unit linked to British intelligence and concealed the funding by using the BBC to make the payments, declassified government documents show. The money was used to expand Reuters' coverage of the Middle East and Latin America and hidden by increased news subscription payments to Reuters from the BBC. We are now in a position to conclude an agreement providing discrete government support for Reuters services in the Middle East and Latin America, according to a redacted 1969 British government document marked secret and entitled Funding of Reuters by HMG. HMG's interests should be well served by the new arrangement, said the document, which was declassified last year. HMG, James Bond fan, stands for Her Majesty's Government. The extent of influence, if any, that the government was able to exert over Reuters news in return for the money is unclear from the documents, which detail a 1969 secret British government financing deal for Reuters. However, the documents illustrate the level of involvement the government once had in Reuters' affairs and the explicit agreement to hide the money. Earlier on Monday, the BBC published a story about the government funding. Many news organizations received some form of state subsidy after World War II, David Crundwell, a spokesman for Reuters, said. Related links. U.S. Department of Defense paid Canadian company's subsidiary $9 million for social deception contract. Now, James, our buddy T-Lab was talking about this as well, and I saw, of course, on Twitter, where there has to be argument, some back and forth arguing about this wasn't Reuters. Break this down for us.
All right. On the first story, yes, I thought it was particularly funny. Reuters.com reporting about this Reuters thing. Apparently they received money in the 60s and 70s. Brought to you by Reuters. It's a funny story. And color me shocked. The most craziest part of that story in particular is the quote from Reuters where it's like, oh yeah, but all the mainstream media was receiving funding post-World War II. So it's okay. We're all being paid by the government. I don't think these establishment media critters realize that their reality distortion field has dropped and it doesn't work anymore. And we see right through that, right to them. It's like, no, that isn't okay that you all received money from the government in order to do your propaganda operations on the public. That isn't a good thing. Oh, everyone was doing it. We don't care anymore. Anyway, so that's a crazy story, but color me shocked. I never would have guessed. But yes, on this other story, the Thomson Reuters, Special Service, TRSS. Yes, so the clarification that needs to be made is that Reuters News Agency is a subdivision of the Thomson Reuters Corporation, and Thomson Reuters Special Service is a different subsidiary. They are not the same thing. This isn't the Reuters News Agency. But it does, to my mind, it does raise the question of why is the Thomson Reuters Corporation that owns Reuters, why does it have this special service subsidiary that does these data-driven operations for DARPA and others, doing government contracts for social deception operations? Like, that doesn't make me feel any better to know that, don't worry guys, this isn't Reuters News Agency. But as the fact-checkers actually correctly point out with regard to this, yeah, Musk talks about this like, oh my god, look at this. Wait, When did that contract get signed? Under what administration? Oh, that's right, Trump. It was Trump 2018 White House that was signing these documents. So that's the excluded part that they don't want you to think too deeply about. But don't worry, guys. Now Elon Musk and Doge is in there bringing their technocratic algorithmic resources to bear to get rid of all this waste and corruption. So you can pinky swear they're not going to do any of this kind of stuff behind the scenes anymore. Anyway, it's a crazy story, and I agree that the distinction should be made, and people shouldn't say things that are factually untrue about them, like that this is the Reuters news agency. It is not. In the same way, USAID was not funding BBC. they were funding BBC Media Action, which is the BBC's charitable arm. It's a different thing. They're providing services around the world, blah, blah, blah. And the fact checkers will come along. No, USAID wasn't funding BBC. Anyway, and that's another incredibly crazy part about this Reuters, the original Reuters story, is that, yeah, they were giving this funding to Reuters through BBC paying extra subscription fees to Reuters. And that was how they were masking it, which is a double whammy because, one, it's proving that, yes, the BBC is just an arm of the British government, and they literally use it as a funding device for their secret operations. And secondarily, yeah, the fact that these subscriptions are one way that they will do this. It's like money laundering. Like the Politico Pro subscription that costs whatever, $10,000, and the Biden White House had 100 subscriptions or whatever. It's just money laundering. It's just like, hey, we need to give you a couple $1 million, but we need an excuse for it. How about a Politico Pro subscription? How much is that worth? It's worth $82 million. Here you go. Whatever. They just make it up. It's crazy, but this is how it rolls. I'm glad this sort of stuff is coming to light, but maybe we should save some of our suspicion for the people who are currently occupying the positions of power as well, huh?
Well, and how quickly are we finding things out now? Oh, those crazy spy drone balloons, that was a Biden problem. Oh, the drones that were terrifying New Jersey, that was all part of a government operation. Stay tuned for more about the Media Monarchy Pro subscription at the end of this episode. It's just $75,000. We talk about these, it's always the middlemen, it's the fronts that create. I always look over at it and look at the Mark I wanted to say Mark Dice. That's certainly not the one who wrote Plausible Denial and Rush to Judgment. Mark Lane. Mark Lane's Plausible Denial. It's not Mr. Burns doing all that stuff. If you actually look at the records, this canary owns the nuclear power plant. It wasn't us sexually abusing and torturing a bunch of prisoners. Those were our contractors at DynCorp who were still on the payroll. That's a good, maybe we should give them that just sort of simple Star Wars Disney level analogy. Your shields are down. Your crap doesn't work anymore. Evasive action. Try a new approach. That's how we get going on New World Next Week, episode 582. We started out as dudes in our apartments, and now the mainstream imitates all of us. James, what a time to be alive. Our second story, what do we learn? Conflicts of interest in climate science, a systemic blind spot. Taking this from What's Up With That and everything we say, always included down in your show notes. The field of climate science has long been presented as an objective, data-driven discipline, immune to the biases and financial conflicts that plague other scientific domains. However, a recent preprint study by Jessica Winkle et al., Conflicts of Interest, Funding Support, and Author Affiliation in Peer-Reviewed Research on the Relationship Between Climate Change and Geophysical Characteristics of Hurricanes. That is the full catchy title, and it challenges this assumption, shedding light on the alarming lack of conflict of interest, COI. I didn't know it was an acronym, James. COI disclosures in climate research, particularly in studies linking hurricanes to climate change. The study's findings reveal a disturbing trend. Not a single one of the 331 authors analyzed disclosed any financial or non-financial conflicts of interest. Moreover, the research found that funding from non-governmental organizations, we know that acronym NGO, was a significant predictor of studies reporting a positive association between climate change and hurricane behavior. If they took the money, they said the thing. This revelation should prompt serious scrutiny of the integrity of climate science, particularly in areas with high policy relevance, things they're going to try and make actual changes on. Given the influence of climate research on regulatory frameworks, financial markets, insurance policies, and public perceptions, I would say those last two being maybe paramount, it's imperative that the same rigorous COI disclosure standards applied in other scientific fields be enforced here. And we will link up the study, Conflicts of Interest, Funding Support, and Author Affiliation in Peer-Reviewed Research. But some related articles, one from International Man, The Collapse of Net Zero. And there was some point, James, here in the recent months of New World Next Week, where each week we were like, Goldman Sachs bailed out of the whole net zero thing. oftentimes just to create their own in-house climate change bureaucracy that's a little more walled off from the rest, profiting from the implosion of the green bubble. So again, that's how these dudes roll. I talk about this on my show for decades. The powers that shouldn't be will lord over the prohibition of something and wring every cent they possibly can until you can't just get any more blood out of that stone. And then they'll flip a switch and make money off of marijuana instead of just throwing you in a prison for it. Scientists want to release, this final related one, James, scientists want to release 160 wolves in Scotland to help the UK hit net zero target. That could be fun, but now are these actual wolves, or I was thinking of those recordings of PSYOP wolves? Those are in Canada, right?
Yeah, good callback, actually. For people who don't remember that, maybe we should throw that in the show notes for people who don't remember. Yeah, the PSYOP wolves. Crazy stuff. On the note of the conflict of interest study, I think the thing that jumped out at me at first, the first thing that I noticed, was that positive correlation between researchers who accepted the NGO money and the, oh my god, climate change is causing hurricanes. So that there is such a strong correlation between those things seems obvious to those of us who are tuned into reality and realize that, yes, obviously, it's the unstated implicit assumption that these various groups that are funding this research are funding it for a specific reason, because they want to trumpet, oh my god, new study shows hurricanes are caused by climate change. Well, why are they decreasing in intensity and number? Don't worry about that, guys. But, of course, I haven't seen this argument, but I'm sure that the exact opposite will be there. Well, of course, the NGO-funded studies find the correlation, because the other studies must be funded by big oil or something that don't want to find that correlation. It's the unwinnable game in that sense. On the interest, on the subject of the conflict of interest, I would say, yeah, again, it's not surprising that researchers don't disclose, oh my god, well, we got a grant from this whatever, NOAA or whoever, to do this study, because that's totally neutral funding. They'd only have to disclose it if it was like Exxon or something like that, and we didn't get any money from them. Therefore, there's no conflict of interest. So conflict of interest is in the eye of the beholder, so I'm not surprised that they wouldn't disclose that, and yeah, I think they should disclose all the financing that they got, all the grants. Who were the grant funders? That is information that should be available. I'm holding my breath waiting for that to become the norm, but we'll find out. Having said all of that, I am thankful at least for one thing over the course of the scamdemic, is that finally, a significant number of people, perhaps for the first time in their life, started to question what the people in the white lab coats are saying simply because they have a white lab coat. They can't possibly be in any way brainwashed themselves and or funded by people who want to put propaganda out and or just straight out lying to the public. No, could never happen. Well, we just saw it happen. So finally people are starting, and I've even gotten emails from people. I used to think you were crazy for all your climate change nonsense, but now I actually realize, yes, thank you. Welcome to reality. If people want to know more about the specifics of the environmental movement in particular, how it was taken over and by whom and for what purpose, well, I have an essay for you. It's called Who Controls the Environmental Movement, and it is one of the 20 essays in my brand new book, Reportage, Essays on the New World Order. So I hope you will get a copy and read that essay for much more information on the specifics of how this operation has been done. But yes, scientists do not float on clouds, and they are not immune to the usual pressures that every other human being is susceptible to. And this study is just another case in point, just another thing to prove that point.
Reportage not available through the Media Monarchy Pro subscription. James, how similar are these first two stories? It's like these are the exact same stories. Propaganda funds roll through your government and media, so they'll say whichever. Depends on which way it flows. Again, like Mussolini said, it's all still corporatism. It really struck me. It's like, wait, this is the second story. We changed subjects ostensibly on this episode 582. Holy moly. So, where do we go from there? How about maybe instead of another week of Trump dates, we get weird? I'm a true crime fan. I have got 6 words for you. Trans vegan terror cult serial killers. From the Associated Press. Leader of cult-like Zizians linked to 6 killings ordered held without bail in Maryland. Dateline, Cumberland, Maryland. Scumberland, we called it back east. The leader of a cult-like group connected to 6 killings in 3 states was held without bail Tuesday in Maryland, where she faces trespassing and other charges. Jack Lasota, 34, and 2 others arrested with her on Sunday appeared via video conference for bail hearings in Allegheny District Court. A judge ordered all 3 held without bail, describing them as dangerous flight risks. Now see if you can keep up with this wild story. Allegheny County State's attorneys James Elliott said during the hearing Tuesday that Lasota has faked her own death in the past and appears to be the leader of an extremist group called the Zizians, Z-I-Z, that's been linked to multiple deaths. Lasota, known online as Ziz, Z-I-Z, asked for pre-trial release, saying she's homeless with no means of traveling, suddenly. Speaking haltingly, she also repeatedly requested a vegan diet, saying she could starve, otherwise was already in a mild state of delirium due to lack of food. I haven't done anything wrong, she told the judge. Note they didn't say, I didn't kill anybody. Members of the group have been tied to the death of a woman during an attack on a California landlord in November 2022, the landlord's subsequent slaying in January, and the deaths of a Pennsylvania couple in between. Most recently, the group has been linked to a highway shootout in Vermont that left a U.S. Border Patrol agent and one of the car passengers dead. This is really when I started, it was like, wait, somebody killed a border agent? That's not a routine occurrence here in the state, as you might imagine. The borders are kind of a big thing. The Pennsylvania victims were the parents of Michelle Zajko, who was arrested with Jack Lasota and Daniel Blank. All 3 were charged with trespassing and obstructing law enforcement after a Frostburg, Maryland resident told police 3 suspicious people had parked 2 box trucks on his property and asked if they could camp there for a month. This sounds like the weird Taos compound. The trucks were found in a largely remote wooded area near the Maryland-Pennsylvania line, according to police. Again, James, this is my whole back East Coast stomping grounds. Zajko, 32, was also charged with resisting arrest and carrying a handgun. Lasota was charged with having a gun in a vehicle. They were dressed in black, and 2 wore gun belts holding ammunition, according to police. Officers, found a rifle in the back of one truck and a handgun on the front floorboard. Zajko, who refused to put her hands on her back and was taken to the ground, was also carrying a handgun. Elliott, the aforementioned prosecutor, said 2 other guns Zajko purchased were recovered in connection with the January 20 shooting death of Border Patrol agent Chris Milan, 44, following a traffic stop in Coventry, Vermont. So how are they able to get guns? Maybe we'll have to grow and get more hardcore on the Second Amendment. Felix Baukholt, a passenger in the car, also died. And the driver, Teresa Youngblut, had pleaded not guilty to federal firearms charges. And again, that was the first I had heard of this story. Teresa Youngblut murdered a border agent. Who would just go off and do this? And I started to see a little more and started to see actually places like the San Francisco Chronicle hardcore doing investigations into this story because they realized, as again, many news outlets might go, this is a huge story and nobody's really talking about it. It's in our backyard. We might be able to win a Peabody or something. So much to the story, but suffice it to say, at the middle of it all is Jack Lasota, a transgender woman who published a dark and sometimes violent blog under the name Ziz. Rebecca Francor-Bredden, public defender representing Lasota, said she had spoken with Lasota's mother twice since the arrest. The attorney noted Lasota's educational achievements, including a degree in computer engineering. This is a very, very bright person we're dealing with. I went into this pretty heavy on a Morning Monarchy recently, February 6th. I will link that up. The trans-vegan terror cult serial killers the mainstream media have to ignore. James, a little bit of strange true crime, because again, we wonder about all the funding, we wonder about all the front groups, but we also wonder how many of the serial killers and satanic ritual attacks are fronts for intelligence agencies for any number of nefarious reasons. James?
Yeah. It often turns out that way, doesn't it? And I must admit, you say, I hope you can follow all this. I think this is my 3rd time reading through this story, and I'm still trying to piece it together in my head, and I still don't quite understand what this group is, or why they're killing landlords, or what
their
what
parents.
Any of this is.
It's wild. It does have a feeling of a natural born killer. Again, and you got to wonder, and oh, they write a blog. And how known to law enforcement are these folks? And how many times are they going to later say, oh, well, shucks, we should have gotten them here, or we should have stopped them there?
And it turns out they were part of some MK Ultra experiment 20 years ago. And we'll wait for that update. But in the meantime, I just think it's interesting. Yeah, a whole part of the story is that you notice when the mainstream are reporting on it, they will constantly just use the name Lesotho, so they never have to use this person's pronouns. Anyway, interesting stuff, wild and crazy. And it just, you know what it brings to my mind? I wonder what the news would have been like in, say, 3rd or 4th century Rome. Like, what would the average Roman have been hearing as their empire is collapsing around them? What would have the average daily news roundup been like?
See, we're always given the mainstream ideas here on New World Next Week for over 15 years. Now watch, there'll be a show where it's like, what if the news was in the Roman Empire? And they'll turn it to be that it's all conspiracy theorists and Trump's fault, probably. All right, that is New World Next Week, episode 582. Indeed, newworldnextweek.com is your place to find Media Monarchy caps. I'm just joking about that pro subscription, but again, your support, your subscriptions are what keep Media Monarchy and Corbett Report advertising free. You have never, ever, ever seen any advertisement on any of our work that was placed there by us. If it was some other third-party upload that took the work, all well and good. That's what keeps us going. And I think, again, we're not the flashiest. We don't have all the best stuff. Brock does a fantastic job making these videos. But again, they're not the most flashy, blingy types of things that all the other kids out there have on TikTok. I think we bring the meat, though, if you will. So New World Next Week is the place to support us. And James, do you have more to say about a reportage?
Buy the book. No, not a lot. Just reportagebook.com. Yes, I don't sell snake oil. I don't sell VPN subscriptions. I sell this book that I hope will actually be useful for people in the info war, as it were, if we can use that polluted term. Anyway, reportagebook.com.
Okie doke. Well, the main thing I sell, because the work is all free. The shows I do are all free. The hour of news I put up, the hour of music I put up, 10 times a week are all free. The thing I charge for is to come in and hang out with me in a private, members-only Media Monarchy community. Been doing that for many, many years, James. You've joked many times that your people say, you should do that. And you're like, Pilato has it. Come check us out, MediaMonarchy.com/join, James.
That's it. All right, cool. Well, I'm looking forward to doing it again. Thanks for the stories.
All right, buddy. Take care, man.